This Orange County Centennial Legacy Program has been made possible by major grants from the Orange County Register, the Santa Margarita Company, and Parker Automotive Corporation. (1989), the year of its centennial. Orange County is one of the most affluent and technologically advanced counties in the United States. Its golden beaches, glittering shopping centers, and prosperous high-tech business parks give it the appearance of an American dream come true. If it were a country rather than a county, it would boast one of the world's largest economies. During the past 40 years, the transformation of Orange County's landscape has been so far-reaching, however, that much physical evidence of the county's earlier history has been obscured, if not obliterated. In fact, many people look upon Orange County as little more than a post-World War II phenomenon. They are unaware of the county's long and richly varied history. The Orange County Centennial thus provides a valuable opportunity to journey back in time and to rediscover the historical forces that have helped shape Orange County. Over the centuries, many different groups have been attracted to this region, and each has left some imprint on the land. The people who lived here longest were Native Americans.
From the prehistoric past, Orange County has been an abundant land with remnants of men here at least 20,000 years ago, probably going back as far back as the Ice Age.
Paul Apodaca is curator of folk art at the Bowers Museum in Santa Ana.
The people who lived here in Orange County had a very luxurious lifestyle by many other Native people standards. They had an ample supply of food with lobster dinners available to them off the coast of Orange County with the California spiny lobster. Because of the great abundance of food and good weather, we estimate that Indians here only had to spend about 4 hours a day maintaining their lifestyle. The rest of the time then was left free for art, for science, for leisure, and the arts of Orange County blossomed in the form of basketry. And the Indians of Southern California, as well as the Aleutian Island Indians, are considered the finest basket makers in the world.
Two different Indian tribes inhabited present-day Orange County. The names by which we know them come from the Spanish. Gabrielino, for those Indians living in the territory associated with Mission San Gabriel, and Juanino, for the Indians who lived in the vicinity of Mission San Juan Capistrano.
Native Orange Countyans used the stars, the sun, the moon in order to set calendars, to be able to navigate on the ocean, to travel along the land. All of these were well within the knowledge of the native Californians that lived here in Orange County. One of the great achievements of Southern California culture was the plank canoe. The Tomal, as it was called among the Chumash in Santa Barbara, was the only plank boat ever made by Indians in North America.
Plank canoes, similar to this modern recreation of a Chumash-style Tomal, were used widely along the coast of Southern California.
Long before Europeans ever came to California, trade was very important to the economy that was very wealthy here in Southern California. From the southwest, turquoise and other items were brought all the way out to the coast, and foodstuffs were traveled from the coastline of Orange County out to the island chain that we call Catalina. When the Spaniards arrived here in Southern California, they noted that these boats could literally travel in circles around the landing craft that was used by the Spaniards. It's estimated that these boats, open-paddled on the ocean, could travel at a remarkable 9 knots.
In the late 1700s, historical forces were at work in distant Spain that were destined to disrupt the local Indian culture. Historian Norman Nerberg explains what prompted Spain to undertake the colonization of Alta California.
This was motivated, among other things, by a fear of the extension of Russian colonization from Alaska into California. Also, they were very concerned in finding a good, safe port where the Spanish galleons from the Orient could stop on their way to Acapulco. And finally, they were motivated by one of the original charges given to the Spanish government by the Pope at the time the New World was divided between Spain and Portugal, that is, to evangelize, to Christianize the native peoples.
Since a military-style occupation was considered too costly, Spanish authorities chose the mission as the most appropriate and efficient instrument of colonization. Harry Francisco, field archaeologist at Mission San Juan Capistrano, describes the Spanish plan.
So the plan was for the churches to locate at strategic locations which could be held with a minimal military occupancy. In line with this policy then, in 1769, Gaspar de Portola and Father Junipero Serra moved north from Baja California and established a mission in San Diego. After the founding of Mission San Diego, Portola continued north, passing pretty much through the length of present-day Orange County, and naming places which still have names that hang on, such as Cristianitos Canyon, where reputedly the first Indian baptisms occurred, and Trabuco Canyon, where a Spanish soldier lost his trabuco, or horse pistol.
Mission San Gabriel, which had authority over the northern half of what is now Orange County, was founded in 1771. Mission San Juan Capistrano was established 5 years later, in 1776. The Spanish used Indian laborers, teaching them the skills necessary to build and sustain the missions. The development of the mission system, not to mention the further colonization of Alta California, was cut short, however, by a great historical upheaval to the south, the beginning of the Mexican War of Independence in 1810.
When Mexico began its War of Independence with Spain, the lines of communication, and particularly of supplies, broke down rather rapidly, and the missions were thrown out on their own. Some of them remained flourishing economic units, such as Capistrano. Others were unable to survive.
Although Mission San Juan Capistrano survived the disruptions caused by the Mexican War of Independence, the local Indians didn't fare as well.
The Indians did not have natural immunities from the Spanish diseases, measles, mumps, chickenpox, and were decimated by these diseases. The native population went from probably 125,000 in the Spanish area down to 5 to 6 or 7,000.
Despite the decline in the Indian population, the village at San Juan Capistrano continued to grow, even after Mexico achieved its independence from Spain in 1821. In 1833, however, a great change took place that was to fundamentally alter life in Alta California. That year, Mexico decided to secularize all mission lands, dividing them into large tracts called ranchos. The ranchos were then given to private owners in the form of land grants. Bernardo Yorba, a descendant of Jose Antonio Yorba, who received an early land grant in Orange County, describes the beginning of the rancho era.
Mexico was very much interested in the colonization of Alta California. They had heard of and had seen the movement of the Americans toward the West, and to be sure their claims were credible, it was necessary to develop a rancho system to even a greater degree than what had taken place before. And so they were rather free with the granting of ranchos, but at the same time being careful to select those who would develop the land and not just sit on it and speculate. They wanted activity, they wanted herds, they wanted groves and orchards to develop a real trade in Alta California, between Alta California and Mexico, and even other countries.
For a time, the ranchos flourished, giving rise to a colorful way of life in Southern California.
They were famous for their parties, the weddings and the fiestas. The women were gorgeous and dressed beautifully. The trading ships would bring in the silks and the mantillas. But life was not all peaches and cream in those days. The drought in the middle of the 1800s changed the whole face of California. Cattle died, well, say in the first year of the drought, well, okay, we have a bad year, God's going to provide, there's always rain, there's going to be grass, the cattle will thrive. Well, then another year went by with the same thing, and another year, and the first thing you know, cattle were dead everywhere. And in the interim, these naive individuals were borrowing money from, I hate to call them carpetbaggers or things, but let's say opportunists from outside of California who loaned money at absolutely outrageous interest rates and were willing to foreclose and desired to foreclose at the drop of a hat.
While California was still ruled by Mexico, immigrants from Europe and the eastern United States began arriving, attracted by the opportunities in a new and open land. The Mexican authorities welcomed them, hoping they would hasten local development. One such immigrant was John Forster, who had been born into a poor working-class family in Liverpool, England. Forster's great-great-grandson, Tony Forster, recalls the beginnings of his rise to prominence.
In the early 1840s, Forster left San Pedro, where he had become the first captain of the port, and moved to what is now Orange County, where he began acquiring land. His first two acquisitions were Rancho Mission Viejo and Rancho Trabuco. In 1845, John Forster bought the Mission San Juan Capistrano at public auction for the staggering sum of some $710. The mission was offered for sale under the secularization program as administered by the then Mexican government. He moved his family into the mission right here in the South Wing, where he lived for approximately the next 20 years.
By 1848, the United States had expanded all the way to the West Coast, forcing Mexico to give up Alta California and other territories. In 1850, California became a state. Forster responded by taking American citizenship, and for the next 30 years, he continued expanding his land holdings.
At the time of his death, Forster had amassed nearly 250,000 acres and 30 miles of coastline in Southern California.
John Forster left behind not only vast holdings, but also vast debts. His heirs were forced to sell most of the ranch. This time, the holdings passed into the hands of another immigrant, Richard O'Neill, who had been born in County Cork, Ireland. The sprawling O'Neill Ranch, now called Rancho Mission Viejo, stands as a link between the rancho era of the 19th century and present-day ranching in South Orange County. Rancho Mission Viejo has been operated by members of the O'Neill family for over a century. Two of the current owners are Richard J. O'Neill and his nephew, Anthony Moiso.
There's pride in how the ranches are kept up, how the rangelands are maintained, how the herds are improving every year. And so that feeling, I suspect, has been here on this ranch, as in other ranches in Orange County, the Irvine Ranch and the Moulton Ranch across the way, down through the decades. You know, one of the things that occurs to RJ and to me is that when you have are fortunate enough to have land like this, to have a lot of land. Over the years, you become emotional with the property. You become very fond of some of the places on this ranch. We know that in certain canyons there are red-tailed hawks and where they live, what tree that they're in.
I take walks on this ranch and I get to know where the springs are, where the nice canyons are, and I do go out on occasions and have a picnic out there. So you get very defensive. You want to hold on to those kind of things for yourself and for the future.
One aspect of this ranch about which we're really proud is the fact that it is still a ranch. Every day there are vaqueros, there are cowboys here that go out and tend to our cow herd. And each spring, after the calves have been born, there's a spring branding. And we still go gather the cattle and we brand them here. And as we've said many times in public, we plan to do that for 100 years to come.
In the middle of the 19th century, when cattle raising was still the dominant economic activity in the region, new winds began to blow through Orange County, bringing with them new kinds of development. Not long after California statehood in 1850, a group of German immigrants then living in San Francisco made plans to establish a colony in Orange County. Florence Mitchell is related to the founders of what became the city of Anaheim.
Anaheim has the most interesting history in the state of California. It is one of the oldest developmental experiments in colonization that we have. And I'm particularly interested in this kind of thing because my great-grandparents were part of the original settlers of this city of Anaheim. My grandmother, whose name was Amalia Froling, was the first bride of Anaheim. She was married to one of the founders of Anaheim, John Froling.
John Froling was in the wine business. He and several other German immigrants dreamed of creating a great wine-producing colony, one that would be patterned after similar communities in Germany. In 1857, a comprehensive master plan was drawn up for the new settlement, making Anaheim the first town in Orange County to be developed according to a master plan. The colonists sent a representative, George Hansen, ahead of the main party to purchase land and begin preparing their model town. Hansen hired a number of Indian laborers to do the preliminary work. When the colonists finally set foot in Anaheim 2 years later, lots had already been laid out. Roads had been cleared, an irrigation canal had been constructed, and vineyards were already in place and ready to bear fruit. Despite all their preparations, however, the settlers still had to face many hardships.
They had floods, they had droughts, they had a grasshopper plague. The hardships were terrific. With all of these things happening, these people were very successful in creating these vineyards. In fact, for 25 years, the vineyards from Anaheim were the largest in the state of California, and they shipped to places all over the world. It was a growing industry.
While Anaheim continued to grow, other settlers began establishing farms in Orange County. More and more land was brought under cultivation, and farming slowly replaced ranching in the fertile Santa Ana Valley. Over time, Orange County developed into one of the most productive agricultural regions in the state of California. The next great historical force to affect Orange County arrived on steel rails. Trains, such as this 1880s steam locomotive now in use at Knott's Berry Farm, helped open vast areas of the West, including Orange County. Steve Donaldson is an authority on the railroad history of Southern California.
As new lands were added to the United States, there was a need for increased transportation and communication with the eastern seaboard, and the railroads were the solution to that problem. Railroads provided a more economical and a more rapid means by which people could travel from east to west and by which they could receive the goods and materials that they needed to set up their pioneer communities. The first railroad to be built in Orange County was a branch of the Southern Pacific, which came down from Los Angeles to Anaheim. This line was built in 1874 and opened for service in 1875. There were mixed feelings about whether this was going to be a benefit or not to this area, and in fact, a vote was held in order to determine whether bonds would be floated, taxes levied in order to subsidize the construction of this road. The people of Orange County actually voted against it because they felt that the cost was greater than the benefit would be, but because Orange County was then a part of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles County as a whole voted in favor of the project, Orange County received its first railroad really over its own objection. In spite of initial reservations, the railroad proved to be quite an economic benefit to Anaheim and Orange County at large. No longer did merchants and farmers have to haul their crops all the way by wagon over dusty and sometimes very muddy roads to either Anaheim Landing or San Pedro Bay. The Southern Pacific had a literal monopoly on railroad transportation in Orange County for approximately 10 years, until in 1887, the Santa Fe built down through the Santa Ana Canyon and became the second transcontinental railroad to provide service to this area. A fierce competition soon developed between these two major transcontinental railroad companies. Rates were reduced, which induced people living in the Midwest and the eastern states to come to California to try a new way of living. The Southern Pacific and the Santa Fe took it upon themselves to literally sell Southern California to the rest of the country.
As a result, thousands and thousands of people came to California and began looking at the land.
Dr. Glenn Dumke is Chancellor Emeritus of the California State University System and author of the best-known book on the boom of the 1880s.
Well, the boom of the 80s in Southern California did the same thing for that part of the state that the gold rush did for the northern part. The gold rush made Northern California a part of the United States, and the real estate boom of the 80s made Southern California a real part of the United States.
The boom in Orange County greatly benefited a number of existing communities, especially Orange, Santa Ana, and Anaheim. And it gave rise to several new ones, including Buena Park and Fullerton. The founders of Fullerton, Edward and George Amerige, viewed rail service as being key to the growth of their new community. They were able to persuade a prominent Santa Fe Railroad official, George Fullerton, to provide service to their town in return for a generous land bonus. The rail link was considered so vital that the Amerige brothers decided to honor Fullerton in perpetuity by naming their town after him. While Fullerton survived, many other boom towns didn't. Fairview, St. James, and McPherson are but a few of the many paper towns that failed despite the dreams of their promoters.
Another of these towns was Carlton, which was located near the mouth of Carbon Canyon. Carlton resembled some other boom projects which did not survive. It was located at an elevation, but the elevation deprived it of access to water. And the lack of water and irrigation facilities obviously brought it to a quick end. The boom in general was beneficial to California. It improved the economic activity and accelerated it very violently for a short time. But when it declined in 1888 and 1889, it did not decline to the levels previous to the boom. And that, of course, has been the characteristic of California's economic development all through its history.
Another important effect of the boom occurred in the political arena. When the boom began, present-day Orange County was still part of Los Angeles County, as it had been since California statehood. But as the population grew, there was increasing pressure to create a separate county. Pamela Hallen Gibson, who has written widely on the history of Orange County, recalls the long and often heated battle for county formation.
In 1869, Max von Strobel, the mayor of Anaheim, sponsored a bill in the state legislature to carve a new county out of the lower third of Los Angeles County. He and others were tired of paying taxes and not seeing anything in return. They were also tired of having to deal with officials that were all appointed from the north. And they were physically tired of having to take a buggy ride all day long just to get to the county seat in Los Angeles. So Max sponsored this bill called the New County of Anaheim.
Max von Strobel led a vigorous effort to get the bill through the state legislature, but it failed to garner enough votes.
The first failure didn't really stop the people from Anaheim. They went back and they rethought the whole process and decided, well, maybe the name hadn't been quite right. Maybe it sounded a little too foreign. They finally settled on the name Orange County. Were there oranges in production at that time? No, but that didn't stop them. They thought the name was kind of nice. It evoked the image that they wanted to portray.
During the boom of the 1880s, the balance of political and economic power shifted from Anaheim to Santa Ana. So too did leadership in the effort to form a new county.
E.E. Edwards, assemblyman from Santa Ana, felt the time was right for a sixth and hopefully final attempt to form the new county. He called for some heavy hitters, notably James McFadden and William Spurgeon, two very prominent Santa Ana businessmen. Both of these gentlemen went to Sacramento with very fat pockets. They returned with their pockets empty, but with victory at hand.
That victory, so long in coming, represented a historic turning point. After years of growth and development under the flags of Spain, Mexico, and the United States, Orange County was finally on the map. Santa Ana became the county seat, and on August 1st, 1889, the county government went into operation. The first county courthouse, built at the turn of the century, stands, even today, as a powerful symbol of the political and economic emergence of Orange County. Orange County Centennial Legacy Program has been made possible by major grants from the Orange County Register, the Santa Margarita Company, and Parker Automotive Corporation.